This video is sponsored by Athletic Greens. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Jamsy Online YouTube channel. In the shop today we have a true 396 big block Chevy out of our customer's 1966 Chevrolet Caprice. Unfortunately, the last who knows how many years of this engine's life, it seems to have been sitting with the cylinders full of water that got down the intake. The cylinders are far too gone from rust to clean up at an oversize, and as such we'll be sleeving all 8 cylinders of this block as the customer wants to keep their restoration numbers matching. With that being said, we have a good amount of work ahead of us to get these sleeves installed, so we're going to get started with getting the block fixtured on our RMC 1000 boring and surfacing mill.
I always rotate the block away from myself first, just in case if something did happen and it did come loose. I'd rather the block fall away from me rather than falling on top of my legs. And our square goes like so. What you can see on that fixture is that it mounts off of the main. So just pretend this is the front main, this is the rear main, right where it's mounting. So we have the center line of the crankshaft right here. And imagine this is cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, or what have you. The deck height, and don't mind my drawing because my drawing doesn't show it the way it should be, but right here to right here to right here, right here, right here, and right here, all going to be exactly the same distance from the center line of the main to the top of the deck. We also reference off of the pan rail of the block with that square. So what that does is ensures that our cylinders are going to be 45 degrees to the pan rail on either side, and what that does is ensure 90 degrees between the two cylinders. So they're perfectly square to each other, and again, perfectly the same deck height as well. What our fixture doesn't do is reference the cam tunnel. So what could end up happening is we may be shifted a little bit this way relative to the cam tunnel. So in a perfect world, we would have a fixture that also references the cam tunnel, but in this case, we don't. And in 99% of applications, it doesn't make a difference because the discrepancy is usually negligible. I want to take a quick break to talk about our sponsor for this video, Athletic Greens. AG1 is a comprehensive daily supplement that makes it easy to simplify your health routine. With 75 different ingredients, including minerals, vitamins, probiotics, and more, AG1 is designed to fill the gaps in your diet. On top of providing your daily greens blend, it's your multivitamin, multimineral, pre and probiotic, immunity support, and more. So back when I was in engineering school, I developed a pretty unhealthy caffeine habit, and that has kind of stuck with me through the long hours that I put in here in the shop, as well as in the office editing content. With AG1, I feel a boost in energy that's sustained throughout the entire day, and that's been helping me to cut back on my caffeine. The best part for me is that it's very easy to make AG1 a part of your daily routine. All you need is 1 scoop or travel packet of AG1, mix it into 8 to 12 ounces of water. Shake it up, and it's ready to drink. I actually adjusted to the taste pretty quickly, and my wife actually loves it. She has me send one of these travel packs with her in her lunchbox every single day when she goes to work at the hospital. Athletic Greens is going to give our community a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. So go to athleticgreens.com/JimsAutomotive to get started with your order. Now let's get back to work. So the problem we're going to have next is that when we install sleeves into here, we're going to have to come back and cut these valve reliefs back into the sleeve. We could just grind that out, but I'd rather do it here on the machine. So what I need to do here is actually center up on a cylinder, and then we're going to kind of basically just by trial kind of figure out what the X and Y axis is on the DRO to be centered up to cut that relief. With the indicator in here, we're going to center up on this cylinder here. And I've already got it centered up here pretty well. You can tell that needle's not really running insanely true, but we're not working with a perfect surface. 0 the X and the Y axis on the DRO. And now we have a true center so that when we move our table, we'll be able to get an X and Y reading when we get centered up on our valve relief here.
At this point, we actually have to switch over to a different spindle that can accept our valve seat tooling.
So to cut these, we actually use some of our old valve seat tooling that actually matches pretty dang well with the factory valve relief cut here. I also figured out that the radius seems to be, well, diameter seems to be about 2.5 inches. I've got a mic here that we can put on the Pilot here, which I'm not going to be running when we're actually using it. Basically, what I did is run it up, and I've actually got it set about 6 thousandths over 2.5 inch diameter, but that'll be plenty good for what we're doing here.
In a perfect world, I would have the factory drawings for this block so that I could set up my tooling to the exact correct diameter and know the exact offset relative to the center of the bore. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to find those details, so instead, we're going to do a bit of trial and error until we feel like we have it matched up pretty well. At that point, we'll take note of the X and Y axis readings on the DRO, as well as getting a 0-point reference for our cutter from the deck of the block so that we have an idea of how deep to cut the reliefs later on.
All right, so at this point, we've got the spindle here so that we can cut our valve reliefs, but we need to change over to our other spindle so that we can actually bore the cylinders out to accept our sleeves. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a cutter and we're gonna bore all of these cylinders out to fit the right press fit for these. We're shooting for around 2 thousandths. What we need to do at this point, take some measurements, set up our cutter. We're gonna have to set a stop, well, kind of set up the DRO here so that we know how deep we're cutting, and get ready to get these sleeves pressed in.
We'll start with measuring each sleeve and taking note of the dimensions. The sleeves varied by more than I would have liked, ranging plus or minus a thou or two from the nominal size. We're going to attempt to make the cut in 2 passes, 1 rough and 1 finish cut, but we're planning to bore the 2 banks with a slightly different finish size to accommodate the correct press fit for the range of sleeve dimensions.
You guys remember the centering finger that we used that connects to a dial indicator up here? I'm actually going to center on the bottom of the cylinders where hopefully there's the least amount of wear and we come out closest to what it originally was. It's pretty good right there. I'm going to lock down the table so it can't move. All right, now we're centered on that cylinder. Now the next thing I need to do here is basically zero off the top here so that we can set our depth for how far we're gonna cut. Let's grab a feeler gauge here. Okay, they were just barely touching that. So on our digital readout here, we'll set it to 3 thousandths, just like that. Hit enter, you can see that's what I normally do, so it's already set. We're looking at the spindle stop right now, and from here we decided that we want to bore for the bottom step of our sleeves, because we're going to leave a step at the bottom of the cylinder that our sleeve is going to sit against. We want to be at 5.985, which obviously I'm not going to get that accurate with the tape measure, but the tape measure will get us close. Has a little bit of a delay in it too, so I'm going to set it for actually about 6 1/16 there. And what we'll be doing is we're going to be here close by so that when the machine runs down to the point where we read 5.985 on the digital readout, we're going to stop the machine right there. That way we don't cut any farther through. So I can still go to where we want to stop manually. But the machine would automatically stop it at about 6:020. But I also want to be able to wander away from the machine because I don't want to just be standing here while it's running through. So we have this little spacer. It's just a washer with a groove cut in it. And that can go right over the top there and add a little bit of distance to that. So if I did not happen to be by the machine when it reached that stop, we would hope that if I wasn't here to stop the machine, it's going to stop before it reaches that 5.985. And we're about 30 thousandths shy of that, so that's good. So I've double checked the dimension of my cutter here. We are good to go with that. I'm gonna run down close. We already centered up on the cylinder. The table's locked. We've set our stop on the digital readout and so on. This being a heavier cut, let's run 450 and see how it does.
In hindsight, it was probably a bit ambitious to try and take around 180 thousandths in a single rough cut. The machine has handled up to 250 thousandths cuts before in the past, but the relief at the top of the cylinder seemed to destabilize the cut, and I honestly was getting ready to stop the machine before it started to stabilize.
So since I'm standing close by on this first one, I'm going to pull our little spacer out. 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ugh, what a terrible noise. And now I'm actually going to stop it, and it'll bring our cutter up. I'm not gonna lie, that first cut made me a little nervous there. So on my next cylinders, I'm gonna do 2 rough cuts because things were a little bit more wobbly than I'd like to see them. But anyway, we're gonna move on to our finished cut here. I'm gonna speed up to 500 on this one. $10, $20, $30, $40, $50. So now we've got our first hole finished cut here, and I let everything kind of cool down so I can get an accurate measurement, because after you're first done cutting, it can be hot and you can be a little bit off. I've got our bore gauge set to our 4.284 nominal size that the sleeves are supposed to be. So looking at that, this one came out right at 4.283, a little bit under that. So I'm actually going to make this my bigger bank because I have 4 sleeves that measure, well, 3 of them are right around 4.285, and the 4th one for that bank is 4.286. So at that, we'd have 3 thou on the 4.286, which is more than I want, but it's still okay. And we'll have around 2 thou on the other 3 on this bank, which is ideal. On the other set of cylinders, they're all around 4.284, 4.283-ish, somewhere in that range. So what we'll do is we'll do this bank to this size, and then when we roll over to bore the other bank, we'll change this cutter a little bit so that we can still get closer to our 2000s press fit. And what you'll see here is we have plenty of a lip at the bottom of the cylinder. That's what our sleeve is going to seat against. And right here, basically it left it paper thin, which I knew it was gonna do. So I just knocked that little section out. We'll probably clean that up a little bit more, but that's not a big deal. The sleeve is gonna be plenty supported by the rest of it. And that's really just a backup because the press fit ideally would keep it in place anyway. I'd say that'll work for centered up on this last cylinder on this bank. Let's pull our square out of there. Ouch. Just kind of give it some pressure there. Right there. I don't know if it's very noticeable on the camera, but the sound of it going through the rust and the rust, I guess, dust coming up through is just gnarly on this thing. And like I said, that I meant to do it where the first bank was the bigger bank and the second bank was a smaller, or no, vice versa. But now we're doing it where the first bank was the bigger bank, second bank is a smaller bank. So I'm gonna make this about 1.5 thou, a little more than 1.5 thou smaller. Should put us where we need to be. If not, we'll cut the first one. I've got a couple here that are on the bigger side, so we'll cut the first one, see what it looks like, and if we need to change it again, we can. Here we go with our first finish cut on the second bank of the block. Now, from our nominal size, again, this is set at the nominal size of what the sleeves are supposed to be. Some of them are actually closer to 1,000ths smaller than this. Right here, to nominal size, we'd be in the 2.5 to 3,000ths press range, which for our smaller sleeves put us in, 1.5 to 2.5-ish, 1.5 to 2-ish range, which is where we want to be. So I'm not gonna have to adjust the cutter again. We can just roll through these last 3 cylinders here.
And with that, we have all 8 cylinders ready for the sleeves to be installed. In the instance where we were only installing a sleeve or 2, I'll admit that we've been known to drive them in right there on the machine, but in the case of having to drive in all 8, we opted to break out the old fixture that my dad used back in the day when he had an old school boring bar that sat on the deck of the block to bore the cylinders.
This ever point in a different direction than you thought it was?
You have to clean your glasses.
I know you'll be asking, and if you watch my recent videos, yes, we know that you can use a temperature differential to make installing cylinder sleeves easier, but sometimes it really is just not worth the hassle to have the block hot and the sleeves cold just to still end up driving them in. As installed, the sleeves do require a bit of hand clearancing, but it's just a quick process to make sure that there's room for the crankshaft. Bringing the video full circle, we're now ready to get centered back up on our first cylinder to get ready to cut the valve reliefs into the newly installed sleeves. Once again, after finding the 0 point of our cylinder, we can put our valve seat tooling in and move to the noted coordinates on the DRO after finding our 0 reference relative to the deck.
The center to center distance on these bores should be 4.840 inches. So I'm going to take our 4.840, add that to our 0.9305, and we get 5.7705 for the next one. 10.6105 puts us at 3.9095. All right, so once again, we centered up on this cylinder here, and on this side, we go to basically the same numbers, but in the opposite directions. I think on this side, I'm just gonna zero the X and Y axis here. I don't know why I didn't do that on the other side. So this is 0, 0, one way or the other, 4.840, 4.840, 9.68. So that's the worst looking one, and it's just because there was so much pitting there. It didn't clean up, but we got the edges all the way around, which is what we needed. This one was a little funky. If they all looked like this, I'd be super happy, this one and this one, but got a couple that look a little funky, but not gonna have any clearance issues. On this side, same kind of thing.
And the hardest part of this job is now done. I wish I had time for more, but unfortunately the rest of the machine work on this block is going to have to wait for another video. Thanks for watching, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.